Hey, Comics Cubers. Today we are joined by the co-creator of Trese, Budjette Tan, and the writer of the first full-length Trese spinoff, Verdugo, JB Tapia. Welcome back, everyone, to the Comics Cube. Today we are joined by JB Tapia and Budjette Tan. We're talking about Trese presents Verdugo, and I don't know. There you go. No glare. Okay, Trese presents Verdugo. So welcome to the Cube, guys. You guys have been friends for a long time. What was your first, JB, when did you decide that you wanted to make comics? Like what made you love comics in the first place?
Oh wow. I mean, it's one of my earliest memories actually, getting going to National Bookstore and seeing all those I mean, they used to make these reprints of Marvel comics back in the 70s.
Captain America
And
Mad Bomb.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Mad Bomb. Exactly. They kept going with that one. And I really just loved all those Kirby comics and uh I mean, I really got into it, and it's just so bad that you realize later on that the reprints would only go so far, and there's no continuity whatsoever in any of those things, and you really just have to. Uh, Phil Bars just had to eventually show up to actually have you sell those periodicals, every month. But until then, it was really just you looking at all these single comic books and trying to figure out the story from from one from one little part of it, and I'm a big fan of all that stuff, really. And
To say nothing of National's really bad paper. So like, you would
yeah.
read it and then it would fall apart in your hands.
That's part of the fun of it. That newsprint was awesome. And it smelled great. That musty smell, that was awesome.
When did you realize you wanted to make comics?
Let's see.
Like,
I
was
started.
there a
I
specific
started.
comic? Yeah.
I
When
mean,
when I locked you in a room and forced you? No, earlier, earlier than that.
yeah. I mean, me and Budge, we go way back to the times when we wanted to do comics, and Budge was, I was your typical temperamental comic book artist, and then I sometimes if I didn't feel like it, I wouldn't do it. And Budge got so frustrated with me before because he'd be like, "No, the story's here, man. Let's just get going." And it took so long for me to get to it. And back in college, that was what it was all about. It was Budge going after me and saying, "Come on, let's do it." And again, um, there was a whole bunch of guys back then. Arnold Ari was there. Bo Guerrero was there, and it was really Budge was just so patient, and he tried so hard, but well, finally, 25 years after that, he finally got me going and get started on Verdugo. So it was a long time coming, that whole first comic book. I mean, I felt that I could draw, but you know how it is when you see that blank page, it can really scare you. And for the longest time, uh that really kept me from finishing a comic book. There was always that voice in the back of your head going, "Nah, you can't do this. You can't do this. It's not your thing." Um, but it's funny. It's one of the good things about the COVID-19 crisis was that
Oh,
it got me sitting down and going, "Well, I got nothing better to do. Might as well sit down and do this." Um, praise God for that.
Yeah. Got nothing better to do, so I may as well make my friend happy after 25 years.
Yeah, yeah, it's a long time coming for Budge.
But
So
I,
I can only imagine what it must be like for him.
if I can jump in a bit, that I can So yeah, JB and the rest of the guys would hang out at my house. So I have sketchbooks filled with their sketches because I can't draw. We could just go to show that and that was like the ritual, Friday night, Saturday night, we'd all hang out at my house and just talk about ideas and sketch them out. But a lot of those stories never got past the sketch. There would be a lot of talk of like, oh, it's this character and it's the story is like this, and we would flesh out that story, but it was all talk, and like a few sketches would materialize. But yeah, that was as far as it got. And a few of them did end up in our Comics 101 comic book, which, by the way, we launched in San Diego Comic Con back in 1994, which I'm sure no one remembers.
Oh,
but yeah,
Wow, 29 years ago.
yeah, crazy.
we launched it, meaning I was like going around handing it out to like editors and other fellow comic book creators in the line because we had nothing else to do. But yeah.
I'm gonna ask a two-part question. So the first one is gonna be to Budge. Budge, if you take a look at Taps's art, no, and if you don't know the answer to this question, who would you guess his main influences were art-wise?
Oh, there's a there's a little bit of Mobius there. There's a little bit of and let's see how Taps replies to it.
Yeah.
A little bit of Mobius. Kirby, I think, is a lot in there. Who's your favorite artist from Corto Maltese?
Oh yeah. Gosh, I forgot his name.
The Italian artist. But you would
Yeah.
always reference Corto Maltese. And funnily enough, it's who were the other
Hugo Pratt.
Hugo Pratt, there you
Hugo
go.
Pratt.
Hugo Pratt, Corto
Yeah,
Maltese.
Hugo Pratt. Yeah.
And Hernandez brothers, who did what was that rock and roll comic book that they did?
Love and Rockets.
Love and
Love and
Rockets.
Rocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jaime and Gilbert. Taps,
Yes.
would you like to confirm?
Definitely the Mobius part. I mean, heavy metal was such a big part of my youth, and yeah, Hugo Pratt was in there, which is so funny because a lot of that stuff was colored. Even Jack Kirby's stuff was colored, but I never got the knack for it. That's why, strangely enough, it was when manga started becoming popular, and I started seeing all this black and white stuff, and I realized, hey, I can do this. I mean, back in the day, I couldn't color to save my life. So for the longest time, I was like, I felt like I didn't deserve to make any comics,
Oh,
because
wow.
I mean, heavy metal was colored, but that's why manga was so empowering for me. When I saw manga, I was like, it's interesting how they just decided to embellish on certain things and make sure that it was kind of just enough to actually tell you the story. And strangely enough, even though I wouldn't say I look at a lot of manga, I actually I have to say I got a lot of inspiration from it, because a lot of the manga, the being specific about certain scenes and not drawing everything Western style, because that's what I hated about Western style sometimes. When you look at Jim Lee and he'd draw everything, and he'd like stipple, he'd illustrate it to
Hatch.
death.
Yeah. He'd
Yeah,
render,
and,
he'd
and, I,
hatch.
and I hated that. I hated that rendering stuff, because parang for me it was so needless. Parang why do you have to go that far? And your eyes just didn't know where to go. And manga, again, to the rescue. When I saw how the manga artists were like doing stuff that sometimes was barely a sketch, but it told you the whole story, and it was like, hey, Parang that was just a light bulb in my head. Parang it's like, okay. If they can do that, I can do this.
Yeah, because
So
manga artists are about motion, right? It's about the flow from one to another. They're like Kirby.
exactly. Yeah. That it's so funny that people don't mention that the whole Kirby thing in manga because, of course, the two things when you put them side by side, they don't look anything like each other. But in the sense of storytelling and the way they convey the emotion by making specific scenes and blocking them in such a way as to make them exciting and it pops out of the page. I mean, for me, that's where Kirby and manga really come together and go, oh, hey, those guys know each other, and yeah, so I guess Kirby by way of manga, and Mobius by way of heavy metal, sure. Uh, Although of course I'll never be like Mobius in the sense of his color work was amazing. Again, I only have um awe in my heart for people who can actually draw and color their stuff. But well, I guess I'll just have to settle for black and white.
Perhaps I think anyone saying I'll never be like Mobius goes for like 99% of artists.
That's true. That's true.
I'll never be like Mobius. I'll never be like Kirby. All that stuff. I think I am surprised that for somebody in this particular generation, so we're all about in the same age range, that you don't like Jim Lee and the over rendered stuff. Bunch, is that surprising to you? That yeah, so I think I am surprised by that. But let's get to Verdugo, no? So again, I mentioned you guys are friends. So I think as friends, it's difficult to be a fan the same way that fans are fans, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So uh Taps, how did you get on Verdugo? Did Budge pitch it to you? Were you already like into the lore? Did Budge tell you the lore instead? or whatnot? Or did you pitch for it?
No, I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, for the longest time, I didn't want to get into Trese stuff because there were so many fans, and I was like, I just couldn't find the time to actually get into it because there was just so much of it, and I felt that being a Johnny come lately just wouldn't feel right. I mean, no matter how far I got into Trese lore, it would never be as good as the fans, never be as good as Budge. So there was a part of me that was like, okay, I guess I'll just have to watch it from afar. But when Budge said that, I want to expand the Trese universe, and I have all of these siblings, these brothers of Alexander Trese. I got excited because, I mean, all of a sudden there's like this idea, and I suppose every guy who does work for hire feels the same way. It's like the Trese universe is so established, and the idea that if you can see the Trese universe from a different viewpoint, what would it be like? And for me, that was so exciting because it was like, I mean, Trese is very very mysterious, and it's very I always used to say to Budge, parang it felt like a crime procedural show where you're talking about a mystery of something that happened, and of course Trese plays the detective who's trying to figure everything out. So what if we saw it from another viewpoint? I mean, what would the Trese universe be like if, say, you got it from a monster hunter viewpoint of someone who was like a Punisher type character who, instead of trying to figure out things and seeking a balance the way Alexander would actually try to burn everything down and be like this be like this loose cannon. I mean, what would that be like? What would that Trese be like? And that really got me excited. That's when I decided, hey, yeah, I at least I don't have to be beholden to the Trese universe as people know it, but I can see it. I can try to tell the story from the way I would see it. So there's so much freedom there, and Budge has always been Budge's boy. Just do it, do it, and I really appreciated that from Budge, because Budge could have been a real stickler. He could have. I mean, a lot of creators would have been very, very protective of their work, and they would have said, "Oh, I want you to stick to this. I want him to look like this all the time. I want him to be like, make sure you don't you dot your I's and cross your T's and make sure that everything is like spick and span and everything is Trese-ish." But Budge didn't do that. He was like, "No, no, no, no. The whole point of this, the whole point of expanding the universe is to see different facets of it. So go for it." And that gave me a lot of freedom. So that was
But
great.
what was the process like on your end? Did you ask for a proposal or a written treatment or something? And what did that look like from Paps?
Yeah, it started out with just like any typical Friday or Saturday when we used to hang out in college. It was me, JB, and Bo. I think pre-COVID, and I was in Manila, and then yeah, I pitched the whole idea of what do you guys, which brother do you want to work on,
Yeah.
and what kind of stories do you want to tell? And I think that's what helped JB and Bo as well. Of like what we know about the brothers is what we have seen in the books, right? So so as far as backstory is concerned or where they're going, it is created as the next issue comes along. And then yeah, so coming from that premise of he's the Punisher, monster hunter, loose cannon brother, that's where the whole pitch process started. And even when I went back here in Denmark, JB would either send me, I think maybe we started with a script or a premise before moving into script. So he would type up a full script after we agreed on
Really?
like what's the premise all about. And then after agreeing on the script and the dialogue, that's when he'd start doing pencils before moving on to inks. So it was really a step-by-step process.
I guess I'm always surprised when I hear that a writer artist does a full script still. I guess a part of me is surprised that you don't just do it straight onto the page,
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, Budge actually was wondering about that. I mean, he sometimes gave me this idea that hey, why don't you do it like Marvel style, where you just sort of have this premise that you draw and then you script. And for a while I tried that, but I guess since I started out as a writer, and I was scripting other stuff before I got into Verdugo. There was a part of me that just needed to wear different hats instead of trying to do everything in one go, because that was like going back to the whole blank page fear. When creators sit down and they sit in front of a blank page and it just scares you so much.
Yeah.
One of the ways to get rid of that is to be very, very structured about how you do the process. That's why for me it was all about okay, let's do the synopsis first. If Budge approves that, let's write the script. If everything goes well, then we lay it out. And then finally you do the final art. And yeah, it in a lot of ways it was kind of slow and plodding, but it was also very deliberate and structured. It was very by the numbers, making sure that everything goes right. And sometimes you have to go that way if you're gonna make a story that's gonna be that long. I mean, I never thought Verdugo would be like over 100 pages. That was never part of the plan. But I mean, sometimes you have to. You have to get very, very structured if you want to go that far. And eventually that's what happened. So
the first part of the story, Budge, is in Bloodlines, right? Yeah,
Yep.
so Takutan, which is an anthology set in the Trese world. Uh, by the time of Bloodlines, did you know that you were going to expand it to be this long?
No, the original intent for Bloodlines was supposed to be the book where you get to see more of the brothers,
Mhm.
right? And side stories and the Elseworld stories that we came up with. But yeah, that was really, the delay on Bloodlines is really on my part, which is connected to the delay on book 8.
Oh, so you
Um
knew what I was going to ask ahead of time.
just so that it comes straight from me and not like an accusing question from you, Duy. Uh, but there, so after, I mean, if you take a look at Takotan, I mean, that was it felt like it had a conclusion, but I guess it, definitely, JB left enough doors open that he could go back into that storyline.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, the idea was that the next story was supposed to be, or at least the very first time we talked about it, the intent was that it was supposed to be episodic, right?
Mm.
Just like I said, the idea was that, okay, now that you're done with Takutan, the next story is he will then meet another kind of aswang or fight another kind of monster. And again, that's where JB surprises me and goes, I'm bringing in a creature from another folklore completely. And, it's not going to be a Philippine monster. I said, okay, let's see where this goes. And I think that was also the part of what was going through the back of my head of like, there is no strict lore, but does it feel right for the Trese universe? So yeah, I mean, as every time we discuss a plot line or the premise, that's what goes through my head. And what do you call this? And yeah, it feels like it allowed us to get to this kind of storyline, which I wouldn't, uh, come up with. Something I wouldn't normally come up with.
I was gonna ask you about that actually, Budge, because in 7 books, more or less, soon to be 8, um, you have stuck to Filipino mythology and Filipino lore. So what did you feel when he brought in uh creatures from outside of Filipino lore?
It made sense to me. It was one of those things that if it's part of my checklist of something eventually I would do, which in fact happens in book 8. where it's the reverse. We have and for the Trese readers who follow Kajo on his Instagram, we have serialized the storyline where she goes to Jakarta,
Mhm.
right? So it has been part of the checklist of kinds of adventures I want, or kinds of cases that I want Trese to eventually get into, because there are, the original thought was, we have so many or millions of Filipinos around the world,
Yeah.
like where I am now, and it would
Yeah.
just make sense for them to have brought their monsters or their kulam or their, sumpa, and wreak havoc on that side of the globe, and the police there wouldn't know what is this all about, right? And Trece would investigate where, those Pinoys are, which is but yeah, again, it's like the thought of let's cross over to these other folklore and these other realms. It just felt like, again, it was using Trece as that vehicle, just felt like a logical thing to do. It was just a question of when will that happen. So again, in the case of Verdugo, it just made sense of JB escalating, dialing it up to 11 and to 12 by the time we get to Sinova, of like, what have we not seen in the Trece universe so far.
Carlos Trese, firstborn of Anton Trese, the Verdugo. So the question is, in the beginning of the book, Carlos has a very, very black and white view of the world, aswang bad, humans good. By the end of the book, it has completely changed. You can't go episodic anymore. It's completely its own thing. This question is for both of you. Do you kind of feel that Carlos Trese is now like that his story is now Taps's to continue, Budge? What do you think?
I quick answer is yes, but I do know when I first heard this storyline from Taps, I knew a pathway to link it back to the Trese books. Right. So I know how to eventually connect it to the main Trese what do you call this title, the main arc. As to when that might happen, I don't know. So I will now do the thing that I love and hate the most with Marvel editors of like having a caption either saying this story happens before or this story happens after. See, hey, true no, I'm not gonna say true believers. Hey, Trese readers.
True believers.
This first before you read this.
The word believers means a completely different thing when talking about Trese, I think. Taps, what do you think? Would you do more with Carlos?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. I mean, as I was mentioning to Budge before, of course, the real question there is, in a way, I sort of batted the ball to Budge, and I wanted to see what he was going to do with it because, I mean, right now everything's up in the air with Carlos Trese. Is he an anti-hero? Is he a true villain? Is he? I mean, there are so many ways to go about it, and as much as I would like to sit down and just let's just go for it and start writing, I really wanted to see but what Butch said. I wanted to see how he was going to connect it back to the universe because, well, for one thing, that's how the Treses are. The relationship of Alexandra and Carlos is so intertwined, and it really doesn't feel correct if I were to go about it and sort of like make Carlos go out on his own little world. For me, for it to make sense, Alexandra Trese has to sort of put her imprint on it and say, no, this is what I think about the whole situation. This is what I believe, and this is what I need to do about it. I need to see that if I'm to move forward with the story. So really, not to put too much pressure on Budge, but I'm really waiting for Budge to pass the ball to Budge. No.
I gotta say, really... by the end, Alexandra's taking it pretty well, considered all things considered.
Yeah. But that's why I had the story end with Alexandra Trese, because in a way, I needed to see, as a reader, I needed to see what Alexandra intended to do about it. I mean, the whole spoilers aside, the whole thing about what happened to her brother can't stand on its own. I mean, she can't just take that sitting down. I mean, she has to do something about it. So that's what I want to see. And I can't wait for Budge to sort of touch on that before I get started on any kind of story and next step.
Tell me what led to the flash of inspiration. What was the flash of inspiration that led you to that gigantic plot twist? Why are we dancing around spoilers? Carlos turns into an aswang. Okay, so
if you put it that way,
like, what led you to be like, okay, this is what has to happen in this story?
actually, it's funny. It's funny because there's some people asked me the question, did you know from the beginning when you were writing Takutan that this was gonna happen? And I had to honestly say no, I didn't know. Um, really, every story was brainstormed right after the end of each one. I mean, I finished Takutan, then Budge and I brainstormed, and then we came up with Halimaw. We brainstormed again, then we come up with Sinumpa. There was no, it was all very organic. There was no long ranging arc.
Yeah.
But what really got me thinking was this whole notion of I was really guided by this notion of um, what what would what would shake up the Trese universe in such a way that would enrich it, that would give Budge more avenues to start branching out. I mean, that was what the whole Bloodlines that's what the whole Bloodlines experiment was all about. It was all about coming up with new avenues to see where Alexander Trese could go. So really, my thought was, okay, what is something that is so catastrophic that would happen to Carlos Trece that would shake up the Trece universe and would give Budge some nice dug up earth to start planting new stuff. And at the end of it, I mean, uh, there were so many. Yeah, there are actually two or three synopses that I submitted to Budge for Sinumpa. But I guess at the end of it, parang I realized that we were really just skirting on this whole notion of what would be so crazy that would happen. And we I guess we all knew deep down inside now, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna make Carlos do the impossible, which is to become what he hates the most. Um, and then let's see what happens. It's like that was like the whole idea. Let's just throw let's lob that grenade, and when it explodes, let's see what happens. I'm glad well, I haven't heard a lot of feedback, but those who talked to me about it said that they liked it. So okay, great.
Yeah, I think looking at the spoiler thread on the group, it seems most everyone is on board with Carlos being an aswang and believes that
Hmm.
that opens up a lot of avenues. I have to ask, you did introduce like three innocent teenagers to be his sidekicks, and just as we're getting attached to them, you kill them.
Hmm.
Did that like I guess I'm asking that because I'm surprised that you mentioned that you came up with a synopsis for each individually. So when you
Yeah.
created them here, you didn't know you were going to kill them here.
Right.
So how did
Right.
Yeah,
you feel about
I
that?
I was the but so let me jump in for a bit. But JB was like saying, I was asking, so what happens in the okay, let's do the third one. And he was like saying he was for wanting to continue the storyline of the three of the three kids, right? And I was like going, maybe he just ditches them and he moves on to somewhere else, right? Find a way to get rid of the three and the focus should be on Verdugo. But he didn't listen to me. But it made sense, right? It was necessary for the path where Verdugo would go, right? It's and again it all makes sense, right? Or for like for to motivate or to push it. That's what pushed him to the edge. I
Right.
think all of those things is what those are the ingredients needed for him to finally make that decision to transform. And again, that and the for me the surprising thing that JB put on the table was that it wasn't because of hate or anger that led him to transform, but it was spoilers. It was because of love that he transformed, right? So again, it was like yes, we've seen the whole good guy turns into, his own worst nightmare or turns into the monster he was trying to avoid. But it's just that JB figures out a way to execute that in something we haven't seen a lot, right? So, but
Right.
yeah, so as far as like the three kids are concerned, I was going to say goodbye to them.
Regardless.
I
Yeah.
was not planning to see them, but that's what happened.
Uh, so what was the inspiration behind Dolores?
Oh wow. Dolores is really, I mean, this is so corny, but I mean it was really, I just wanted I mean, stupid idea. I just wanted to ship Carlos with someone.
And it
Who
had
would,
to be an aswang.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, I was like, because there was a question before from one of the fans who was asking like something crazy like what does Carlos use to wash his body with? I mean, does he, what kind of soap does he use? And that I mean, it was a silly question, but it was meant to be silly, but it got me thinking about all of these checklists that the fans were thinking about with regards to Carlos, and I realized that Carlos needed someone to sort of be his alter ego, who would uh, who would eventually be his love interest, because everyone expected that. But of course, knowing Carlos Trese, knowing the way it had to end, uh, I knew that it wasn't gonna be a happy story. You just knew it. You just knew that he's not gonna ride off into the sunset, girl on arm and everything. No, it wasn't gonna be like that at all. The same way with the kids. It's like um you knew that I mean, in the back of your mind you knew that they weren't gonna make it. And I guess that's for me as a writer, that's what I saw the life of Carlos Trece as. It was this slow descent into madness, actually. So the fact that the children that he trained the most, that he felt the strongest for, had to die, and that pushed him over the edge, so that the woman that he loved, who turned out to be who turned out to be his worst enemy, and uh, put out a mirror for him to reveal what he really was, which was a monster, which is one of the tropes that I was playing with throughout the Verdugo stories. This idea that in a lot of ways Carlos Trece was just like the Aswang.
Yeah.
In a way, he was fooling himself, thinking that he was being a human, or that he was a protector of humans. Actually, no. In a lot of ways, he acted pretty barbarically, and it came back to bite him in a big way at the ending. And it just felt logical that way, the way it ended. For me, the whole the whole movement of the story from Takutan to Halimaw to Sinumpa was very logical. It was something that I wanted to make sure that it was something that didn't come out of left field. I wanted it to be something that when you stood back, you realized it had to happen that way, because
Yeah.
of what Carlos Trece was. He's just a loose cannon who kills everyone he loves. So it had to be. It had to end with tragedy.
I think that's what's one of the most surprising. That's why the book is so surprising, is because I think whenever we buy anything or we read anything, we kind of assume that the main character is somehow reflective of the author's voice. But then as this book goes on, you're like, yeah, there's no way he's endorsing this. There's no way.
No, no.
There's there's
Well,
there's no way this is your intention.
Budge would disagree. No. No, I mean, it was it in a way, Carlos Trese is sort of my take on what Batman is. And that's why, in a way, that's also why Dark Knight Returns turned out to be one of the best Batman stories ever made, because one of the main tropes of Batman, Dark Knight Returns, is the notion that Batman is actually a little crazy. He's obsessed. He's a vigilante who
Just a bit.
dreams about bats. You know, it's like that was the whole key to Frank Miller's unlocking of Batman. He was the one who first talked about the idea that, hey, maybe Batman isn't like Adam West. Maybe Adam is crazy. Maybe Batman is
Bruce,
crazy.
yeah.
Bruce Wayne is crazy. He's obsessed. So for me, Carlos Trese was again, parang if he was like Batman, if I wanted Carlos Trese to be like the ultimate badass, I mean, in a superficial way, if I wanted him to be like that, I had to walk down the steps all the way down to the bottom to the cellar, and because that's where his story had to go. It had to go down to where he sacrificed people, he destroyed people, and he eventually walked over his own grave to get the job done. You know, so yeah. Sorry, was I?
Butch, as the
I
biggest
was rambling.
Batman fan here, or as the biggest Batman fan here, is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's the first time JB brought it up, but yeah, I think so. I feel that it does feel like it's the Dark Knight Returns of Carlos Trese. And one of the things that and I haven't told you this, JB, is that one of the things Kajo said was it felt like this first book of Verdugo should be the third book. And he was kind of thinking like, oh, we should see like Verdugo go through other adventures first before we get, because that in a way that's what kind of happened in the third book of Trese, right?
Yeah, that's what you did. I was gonna say.
Yeah. So yeah, and I can see how ingredients from Dark Knight Returns can be overlaid with Verdugo. And I think for me that works because again, we've seen the monster hunter trope done again and again, the anti-hero trope done so much that you can kind of predict where it would go, right? So we could have gone the route of monster of the week, which is again the old Trese formula, but again, by doing it this way, it just allows us to fast forward to that moment. And to reader, I think to most readers, they would understand that this is a path this is something they would eventually see the character do. And that's what happened with Batman. Daredevil did the same thing as well. There were certain story arcs where he goes down that dark path, but he eventually recovers, right? So yeah, the question is, will Verdugo recover from this dark path, or will he just go straight to hell?
Well, as implied by with the answers to one of my questions earlier, Budge, that is on you now. Okay, I have a few questions. Looking at the spoiler thread now for in the group, and you don't have to answer this if it's a spoiler for the future, either of you. But Parusa and Sentencia were forged for Carlos to fight against the Aswangs. Now that he is an Aswang, will they still listen to him?
Ooh, good question.
That is a good question. I was thinking about that. As a matter of fact, at the very end of Sinumpa, if you recall, he saw his hat and his armor, and there was a part of me that was thinking, should he also give up his swords? Because if the swords are who are screaming for Aswang blood, they would never allow themselves to be used by an Aswang. But then I realized also that there's something interesting there that could be used. I mean, that could be like a whole arc right there. I mean, what would it be like for Verdugo to essentially cajole or try to convince the swords to fight for him again, knowing what he was. Because again, there's that whole question of yeah, he in a way he's an aswang, but in the same way that Dolores was an aswang, Dolores was an anti-hero. She wasn't a full-on villain. So would there be an actual situation where the swords would be amenable to being used by Verdugo? Perhaps. It really depends, and that's something that we can explore. In fact, there's a whole bunch of stuff we can explore with regards to Verdugo and what he used to be before. Like I was thinking, his dentures they're made of
Yeah.
his dentures are made of
Oh,
blessed iron. So what does that mean? I
he's
mean,
grown new teeth. I'm sure he's grown new teeth.
yeah.
It
So
would be really thing weird for him to walk around like. And as far as Parusa and Synthesia is concerned, as long as we don't do the Love and Thunder scene where Thor is trying to court Mjolnir back, then we're fine. Oh, Parusa, you're still my favorite. Don't. Let's go kill some aswang. Let's go. No, no.
What exactly turned Carlos? The bond of marriage, the bond of death, or madness?
Oh,
that's a good point because I've always thought it was marriage, of course.
Yeah.
But then when you look back, you realize that madness had a lot to do with it. And there was death and destruction, which was really part and parcel of what Verdugo was all about. So in a lot of ways, it was all three. But if we were to sit down right now and think of a story, for me, that would be one of at least the ways out for Verdugo. If he was to use his aswang hood as a sort of badge of honor in terms of marriage, then that would mean that yun nga, like Budge said, love would become his it would become his reason. So at the very least, that would be something that we could work on as a kind of as an anti-hero, where he would have heroic elements because of the romantic notions that he lives with. But I mean, I'm thinking too far into the future on that one, because fact is, with Verdugo, he is so hell bent on destroying and being destroyed, I think, that I'll have to think about that. I mean,
this is what happened to me. This is a typical conversation with JB where stuff starts to float around, and he'll just capture that, and that ends up on the page. I just wanted to talk about when JB first brought up the whole idea of you become an aswang not necessarily because of the typical you get bitten or you get to drink the blood. It felt familiar to me, of like, yeah, you succumb to the madness and that's what transforms you. And lately I have been reading, I've come across more literature about aswang, because yes, I never read about aswang before writing Trese, and I just
You
made
are
it all
an inspiration, Budge.
I just made it all up. But interesting. I don't know what I'm talking about. But interestingly enough, that there has been literature of what do you call this? Of people voluntarily going through a ritual, right? Either they go through the ritual because they want it, because they want the power, or they hand it over to somebody else, right? Or the typical story you've heard is the aswang cannot die until she gives the black chick over to somebody else, right? So So it feels like, yeah, there is this there are methods to the transformation, which if you look at it from a motivational point of view, right? Why did you want to become an aswang in the first place? It all just looking at it from that lens, it just makes sense, that you undergo the transformation, whether because of anger, madness, or again love.
All right, let's wrap up. Budge, I know that Carlos is the first of the Trese children. Is it important, because you've said multiple times that the creation of Alexandra changed the moment you made her into a woman? Is it important that she is the only woman among the Treses? Like, was that intentional?
I never thought of that, but it felt like it made sense when I introduced the brothers in book 3. It just felt natural that they were all guys.
Yeah.
And again, the assumption that Sinag is the right, the twin sister, so therefore Sinag has always been represented as an exact female, opposite of Trese, wearing the white trench coat. But yeah, it just again, I think the 4 brothers are the 4 different things that Trese could have been. Right? I think those are the different aspects of Alexandra, and she is the combination of all of those things. Because again, the first draft of Trese he was a monster hunter. Not as fleshed out as Carlos, but the thought of tough guy with the buntut pagi, or a magical weapon for that matter, hunting down monsters, that was the original concept for Trese. So in a way, the other brothers, whether it's the exorcist, demonologist, or the researcher, teacher, or the thief who hunts down magical objects, those are things that are, I guess, like the different drafts of Trese. And I just made that logical jump to, let's make her the detective. So I guess in a way, they were meant to be the counterpoint to her. And if by chance I made them, that she had 4 sisters for that matter, I'm not so sure you could say they might start all looking the same, I guess, right? So I think it just made sense that she had 4 brothers before her, and she took the next step. She's the evolved step coming from the 4 brothers.
Verdugo is the first ever spin-off of Trese that you didn't personally write, Budge. Is it intentional because Carlos is the first, or is it because Taps is the first one to finish something?
He finished. He was the first one to finish. Again, the thought of bloodlines was that had I kept to the schedule, then all of those stories would have spun off to their own books, right? So that eventually you would have. I mean, for me, that would be the grand plan. That would be, my dream is to have what do you call this? A series of Verdugo books along with Jimmy and Father Trese and with Professor Rick, side by side with Alexandra. Because whatever happens, Trese's story, the Alexandra Trese story arc ends by book 13. So someone needs to continue.
Oh, really?
Right.
Well, it'll end with the book 13, but
you heard it here, folks. Okay. So we can assume that more spin-offs are coming. I ask this next question for everyone in your group. Who is gonna do the Father Trese arc?
well, Dave has already started the Father Trese arc.
Yeah.
So I think, it's a matter of continuing that as well. Again, it's like delays are all on my end. The Jimmy story is something that me and Bo have started to work on. and yeah, Professor Rick. I actually made one short story with Professor Rick with John Amor.
Yeah.
And yeah, recently he did a bunch of pinups for us. But yeah, as to a continuing arc, again, it's like I think those are the guys that I'm working with for now, but I would love to see other I would love to work with other writers and creators to just see their take on the Trese brothers.
Budge, my last question to you, of course. Of course, you know what's coming. When's book 8 coming out?
We are as of this recording, I have finally received the pencil pages for the last case in book 8. So now again the ball is in my court. I've got several balls right now. So I need to script that because that's one of those scripts that we did Marvel method with Kajo. And the pages are great. It's like it came back to me and I didn't know this was 44 pages long. I thought
It's always the case. It's always
yeah, they're like Verdugo, right? So taps it needs to be 20 pages, and then it's like, whoa, what's happening here? So yeah, so I have the script, and the target is still to release it later this year.
Okay, can we make the announcement regarding that thing behind over my shoulder?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so that is a commission that I got from Bill Sienkiewicz. It's of Alexandra. And I believe, Budge, you will be putting that in the forward to book 8.
Yep. And now that we're announcing stuff, yeah. So the grand plan when that book ever gets done, which is this year,
promise
is that pinky promise is write the intro to that, and right next to Duy's intro is the artwork by the master, Mr. Bill Sienkiewicz. So yeah, so I think those are things to look out for in book 8 as well as a finished book 8.
I almost forgot I was writing the intro. I was like, that announcement is about the art. Taps, my last question is to you. What's next?
Okay.
For you.
Oh, wow. I don't know. I
Doesn't have to be Trese related. Anything else that you might want to plug?
Yeah,
or,
well, see, that's the thing. Like I said, I would love to revisit the Trese universe. I mean, I had such a great time doing Verdugo. So if Budge would have me writing or drawing anything for him, I'm there. And that's an open invitation to Budge. In a way, parang I guess it's because I owe him from all those years back. But
I believe it's 25 years.
yeah, 25 years. I mean, I'm making up for lost time, and I've always thought of Budge as my muse because, trust me, the past 25 years, I've tried to write my own comic books. I've tried to draw my own stuff, and for whatever reason, it never happened. That's why I'm I'm praising my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ all the time because I never imagined that it would come to that. That I would eventually draw Verdugo. That's a genuine miracle. So it really depends on Budge where he wants to go next. I always think of myself as one of his bullpen players. If he needs me to go up to bat, I'm there. So although there's a part of me that's wondering maybe I could be a writer next time or I don't know. It really because Budge is like, no, you draw your own stuff. Budge in his nice editor. No, you
No.
write your own. You draw
Won't
your
let
own
him
stuff.
collaborate, Budge. No. You won't let him collaborate.
I mean, I have been a fan. I think that it boils down to that. I'm a fan of JB stuff, whether it's story or art. Same way I'm a fan of like Bo's stuff as well. So I'm the one who what do you call this? I'm the first reader and first fanboy that enjoys seeing what they do. And yeah, I mean, I think what made me feel like, JB was ready and raring to do something like Verdugo was after collaborating on Dark Colony. I mean, I love what he did with the Grinning Nino of Barang, and that was like a full story again, but that was written in prose. And that was one of those things he tried to turn into a comic book, and it just failed.
Yeah.
After a few pages, that just never took off as a comic book. But yeah, I think it's great to see. So yeah, whether it's written by him or written and drawn by him, I think it's definitely something we'll see more in the coming years.
Thank you guys for coming to the
All right.
Comics Cube. Congratulations on Verdugo. And we're looking forward to book 8, Budge.